As a rideshare content creator, there's often very little good news to report. However, for one particular market, this may be just that. What up, folks? Once again, it is indeed your boy Tim with another ride sharing video. Baby steps. Sometimes baby steps are the path, the key to success. It's a hell of a lot of shit we're not happy with as rideshare drivers, from the pay to the working conditions to the individuals they put in our damn vehicles, lack of transparency, you name it. But what if we decided, as opposed to striking to get changes to all of this shit at once, you took baby steps? Here's a really good article that shows that may actually have some value to it. Baby steps. It comes out of the Denver Post. This article is titled, "Colorado Democrats Make New Push to Give Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash drivers more transparency over their rides." Now, when we say baby steps, notice they mentioned transparency. They didn't say shit about pay, wrongful deactivations, or any of the other host of issues us drivers have with the damn companies. They just strictly said transparency. Now, they tried last January 2023, to get a host of those issues passed. The Democrats were trying to do that in Colorado, and the bill failed. In the political world, it's often referred to as pork. You're trying to get something done and you cram a bunch of other shit in there, and as a result, people don't like the other shit you're putting in the bill, so they reject the whole damn bill, causing you to lose the good things you may have wanted as well. Sometimes, to have success, just focus on the shit you want and don't put a bunch of other things in there. Now, obviously, us drivers, we do want every damn thing mentioned in that original bill back in January, such as pay, safer working conditions, wrongful deactivations. However, Uber particularly, Lyft following in tow, but Uber particularly, with its deep pockets, have been very successful in convincing metropolitan areas that if you raise the price, if you raise the fare for drivers, we're going to have to raise the price of the trip, and therefore nobody's going to be able to afford a fucking Uber. It's all bullshit, we know, because they're taking 80% of the fare. That's why the drivers aren't making shit, as Uber's cut has went up significantly over the years. But the passengers, and most of the time the politicians, don't know that. They don't want to be responsible for ride sharing moving out of their market, or the cost of a ride share trip going up astronomically. So most politicians side with Uber and don't give us shit in the process. However, when I say baby steps, we're talking about things that could be proposed where Uber have no legitimate excuse why they don't want to give it to the driver, other than we're intentionally trying to fuck over the people that drive for us. Transparency is a perfect example. You can't tell the city council or riders in a particular city, we're going to go under if we have to be transparent with our drivers. What the hell does that mean? If we have to tell our drivers how much the passenger is paying, how much we're getting, or what our cut is, and give that information out, we're going to go under. Everybody would know that's bullshit. But transparency on its face alone could lead to us receiving higher pay, bigger tips, all of that shit. Because I do strongly believe, and I think a lot of other veteran drivers agree, that if the passengers knew 50 to 80% of their fare was going to the ride-sharing companies, they would be outraged equally. They would likely tip in cash to avoid the companies from taking it and things like that. The transparency alone would mean a hell of a lot. So I do believe when we're going to legislators, or even if you're striking like on Valentine's Day, push harder for transparency. Because that alone literally blows the roof off of what Uber and Lyft is doing. That's the reason they're getting away with so much of this shit, is the transparency isn't there. Now, for instance, we know in the beginning, 25% was what was going to the ride-sharing companies. Now we know it's almost flipped from a 20% to them, 80% to us. It's almost completely flipped. Passengers, if they had transparency from the beginning, would have noticed those changes. they would have seen that. I mean, you would have had likely more articles, more exposés in news magazines and media talking about it. They didn't know. They don't know. A lot of drivers didn't even realize what the fuck was going on because Uber and Lyft, particularly Uber, have been lying about what's taking place the entire time, such as upfront fares. They're still denying right now that that shit is a pay cut to the driver. Transparency would give us the formula to show that, such as how much do you factor in a driver earning per mile, per minute wait time? What if it goes longer than the expected time? How much more did the driver make? Without transparency, you don't have to answer those questions. However, if it came to proposing transparency as a bill in some of these smaller jurisdictions, Minneapolis, Detroit tried it, there's no legitimate excuse Uber or Lyft could give as to why they don't need to be transparency. Why do we have drivers going to pick somebody up and not knowing where the hell they're going? Why are you hiding the destination from the driver? What kind of excuse could they give for that? There's no legit. You can make up a million excuses why you cannot pay drivers more. You can't make up a legitimate excuse why you're hiding information from people. So I do believe that by going after transparency, which is what they're doing here in Colorado now, and it looks like they're going to succeed because there's not a lot of legitimate reasons Uber or Lyft can give for denying them. So that's the number one aspect of ride sharing to correct what us drivers going through. I think we should pursue transparency, because by exposing what is actually happening, that alone could force Uber and Lyft to have to change the fare that the driver makes, their rating policies, how much they're charging the customer, they're taking everything. Just by telling people the truth of what you're doing. The truth is so fucked up that alone could inspire change. Leave all the other stuff temporarily on the side. You can still fight about it. You can still bitch over it. But I do believe transparency would probably be as they say, the straw that broke the camel's back, because anything you can do in the dark works to your benefit. But if it becomes transparency, you can't hide it no more. And that would lead a host of people to start asking questions, such as passengers that are not happy with why the fares have went up. A lot of passengers believe the fares have went up because the drivers are making a fucking mint. We're not making that money. Most passengers don't know. A lot of passengers do not even know they were taking all or at least some of the tips. Transparency would expose all of that. And I believe in this case, Denver is also trying to make it, or Colorado rather, the whole state, by the way. Colorado is also trying to make it whereas a third party, a state affiliated organization, gets to also have access to the data that Uber and Lyft would have on these trips. I'm a huge proponent of this, a huge proponent of it. I think just about all drivers would be, because we do know that is their biggest weapon against us, is keeping us in the dark on the formulas, on the calculations, on who's getting what, all of that. So I'm a huge proponent of this. But I want to ask you folks, do you see any downside to this? Or better yet, using your biggest devil's advocate mind, what excuse do you think Uber could give to the local governments that would be either voting yay or nay on this? What do you think they could give them as a reason why it's not a good idea to be transparent? I can't think of any damn thing. Last but not least, I saved this for the end of the video because I don't normally mix politics with ride sharing. But you notice this article titled "Colorado Democrats Make New Push to Give Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash Drivers More Transparency Over Their Rides." Obviously, the Denver Post is a Democratic newspaper, because they wouldn't mention this otherwise. They're giving Democrats credit for doing this. Now, fact is, I've said it before, that all of the changes that benefit drivers legislative-wise, it is happening in Democratic areas. And that's not to pat the Democrats on the back, but as I say in most of my videos, they're not going through shit in Boston that drivers are not experiencing in Birmingham. the rates, the fares, the lack of transparency, all of that shit's happening in the South just like it is in the northern states. I would rather, as opposed to being opposed to one political party over the other one, I wish both parties would step up and help us out. I don't like the fact that it's only happening in liberal areas. Seattle is probably the biggest change in our favor. But then California's constantly doing things on behalf of drivers. We know New York just won a minimum wage law, and they also now give drivers paid time off. Chicago has been constantly fighting. We've covered Minneapolis over and over again, Detroit. It really is all in Democratic areas. There's a hell of a lot of drivers operating in Republican strongholds. Why not do what's best on behalf of the drivers in those areas too? Can somebody explain that? Nevertheless, transparency does seem like a good way to go. What say you? As always, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.